We are less than 1 week away to the midterm elections. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup. Well, with just 6 days to go, President Trump is beginning a final push to promote Republican candidates. He has 11 rallies between now and Election Day, with his first stop in Florida, where both the Senate and gubernatorial races are a toss-up at this point. CBN's White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us from the North Lawn of the White House with details. Ben?
Well, John, today President Trump embarked on a bit of a campaign blitz, hoping this last-minute boost will make a big difference for GOP candidates in key races. We're, of course, talking about Florida, Missouri, West Virginia, Indiana, Montana, Georgia, Tennessee, and Ohio. He'll visit a couple of those states twice, including the Sunshine State, which takes us to his first rally tonight. It's in Florida that former Representative Ron DeSantis is facing Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum. Trump has stumped for DeSantis in the past and will renew that support today. The commander-in-chief has also backed Florida Governor Rick Scott, who is hoping to unseat Senator Bill Nelson. Scott suspended his campaign for a bit to oversee the state's response to Hurricane Michael. He is locked in a tight race with Nelson, who is considered one of the most vulnerable Democrats this election cycle. The pair are even neck and neck in the polls. Take a look. A new UNF poll reports 47% of likely voters would make their mark for Nelson, while 46% would vote for Scott. 7% is undecided, and it's those votes Trump is after.
Get out in 2018 because you're voting for me in 2018. You're voting for me.
Now, President Trump has been in campaign mode over the past month or so, holding more than a dozen political rallies in this month alone. Tomorrow, he'll travel to Columbia, Missouri to show support for State Attorney General Josh Hawley, who is aiming to unseat Senator Claire McCaskill. Republicans plan to spend the next 7 days really scrambling to maintain control of the House and Senate. John?
Ben Kennedy at the White House, a busy schedule indeed. Well, immigration has taken center stage at some of President Trump's rallies leading up to the midterm elections. And today he doubled down with numerous tweets on the subject, saying, "Our military is being mobilized at the southern border, many troops coming. We will not let these caravans into the U.S. Our border is sacred." And so-called birthright citizenship, which costs our country billions of dollars and is very unfair to our citizens, will be ended one way or the other. And joining us now is Chief Political Analyst David Brody. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, John.
Let's talk about the role of immigration. Of course, President Trump has been beating that drum beat, but what's the role of immigration going to play in the mindset of the voter?
It's huge. And when I say huge, the healthcare, the economy, immigration, pretty much the top three. Of course, it depends which voter you're asking,
right,
obviously. But, you know, it's interesting, John. Everybody talks about Donald Trump and this deplorable base we hear about all the time. And I put deplorable in air quotes, by the way, just want to let you know, for all those deplorables at home. But it's independents, actually, that are also listening to what Donald Trump says. Now, they don't maybe like some of the tone and the rhetoric, but they don't necessarily have a problem, at least the polls are suggesting, they don't really have a problem with some of those common sense solutions. And so it's interesting to kind of understand that it's not just the deplorables that Donald Trump is appealing to. A lot of independents who voted for Donald Trump in 2016.
Well, I've been reading a lot of the stories, and a lot of the insights suggest that immigration was one of the biggest factors that drove people to vote for him in 2016, and maybe another factor this go around. He has actually followed through on a lot of his campaign promises. What about the ones related to immigration when he was out on the stump, whether it was the border wall or America First? Tell us how he's rated on his follow-through.
Well, it's been good with an asterisk, and the big asterisk is the wall, as he would say. It's obviously not been built. He'll say that it's starting to be built. Okay, there's another asterisk with that as well, because there have just been bits and pieces that have been prototyped and started to a degree, but the funding is not there. And so if you talk to not just the deplorable base, but also independents as well, they will say that the Democrats are preventing Donald Trump from building this wall. And that's what Donald Trump has been saying. They believe Donald Trump on this. So they're going to give him a pass for now on the fact that that wall hasn't been built. So I don't think it detrimentally affects him in 2018. 2020 could be a different story. He's going to have a lot more progress.
Let's talk about that funding, because there's a lot of talk. I know it started with the blue wave. Now I think the word you coined is blue blip.
Yeah.
But
thank you for letting me.
You're welcome. I have to acknowledge, give credit to whom credit's due. But if Democrats take control of the House, the funding has never been there because that's been what Donald Trump has been insisting to get funding in legislation, but they've always had to pull it because legislation wouldn't pass on Capitol Hill if it were in it. So how does he get the border wall if Democrats do succeed in taking over the House?
Well, so let me think. He doesn't. He doesn't get that at all. And quite frankly, even if the Republicans have control of the House, he probably doesn't get it. And the question is, well, why? Everybody, folks that don't follow politics will say, well, why won't he get it if Republicans are in control? Sure. Because the dirty little secret in Washington is there are many Republicans that don't want the wall either. A lot of these mainstream conservative, and I'm about to put in air quotes, but mainstream Republicans, establishment Republicans don't really want that wall built either. So I think that's a big part of it. And so we'll see. But he's not only fighting the Democrats, he is fighting his own party to a degree as well.
Speaking of his own party, the president has received some pushback with his most recent comments about denying birthright citizenship, if you will. It's been interesting to hear whether it's Lindsey Graham or probably even more forcefully Speaker Paul Ryan say that we guarded against this as constitutional conservatives. We guarded against this when Obama tried to rule by executive order, and we have to do the same thing if this is in the Constitution. Is this pushback surprising?
It's not really surprising. Maybe to a degree with Paul Ryan, because Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell have tried to be in lockstep with this president. It can be tough at times. Just ask them. But I think what this was all about is not, a lot of people say it was about motivating the base, but I also think it was about pushing the envelope a little bit here. I mean, the fact that he would try to do this executive order, he knows, and his lawyers definitely know darn well, that this isn't going anywhere right away, that this will be challenged and go all the way up to the Supreme Court. But Donald Trump is an instigator. He wants to push things, and he wants to push this to the Supreme Court to see what they will actually rule when it comes to non-citizens, people that are not here legally, whether or not they have a 14th Amendment right to actually have birthright citizenship. And I think the Supreme Court technically hasn't weighed in on that specific issue as it relates to illegal immigration because we've had such an influx since 1965 in the Civil Rights Act.
It'll be interesting to see however that plays out.
Yep.
Speaking of non-citizens, we still have the migrant caravan that is making its way to the U.S. border. President Trump, of course, had announced that he's sending more troops who are already deployed to meet those and reinforce Border Patrol at the border. Is this a win for either side, whether it's Democrats or Republicans? Who does this gin up the base for, so to speak?
I think it's neutral. I really do, because the folks that were against Trump on immigration were already against him and they were motivated to vote. The folks that were for Trump on immigration are all ginned up and ready to vote as well. So I think it's a wash, quite frankly, though it'll be interesting to see how the tent cities play out. You know, I'm putting everything in air quotes today, John, but tent cities, we know what tent cities mean, but how will that unfold in terms of how they're executed, what kind of the humane conditions that these folks will be in, and if that narrative starts to escape the Trump administration like it did with the separated families, then they're going to have some political consequences down the road.
Right. No, a little bit of an eyesore and something that you have to pay for politically.
Sure.
David Brody, without air quotes, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and thanks for not putting air quotes.
Of course. And CBN News is traveling with the president tonight as he heads to Florida for a rally. We'll bring you an interview with him tomorrow on Faith Nation. Well, the Trump administration plans to change workplace rules to allow employers to deny women insurance coverage for birth control, according to the New York Times. The move aims to protect the religious beliefs of those whose health benefits or health plans fall under Obamacare's contraceptive mandate. Two courts blocked the administration's prior attempts to change those rules. It is unclear what the proposed changes would include or when they would be announced. Well, Stephen Aiden for Americans United for Life joins us now for more. Stephen, what's the importance of the religious exemptions to the birth control mandate?
Well, John, the birth control mandate, also known as the abortion pill mandate, was the rule that was announced by the Obama administration under the Affordable Care Act that required employers, including religious employers, to provide their employees with all forms of FDA-approved contraceptives, and that included certain contraceptives which the government even admitted could cause early abortions. Naturally, there were a lot of employers, Christian and others, that objected to that, most notably Hobby Lobby, which took their case, their objection, all the way to the Supreme Court and won several years ago. In the aftermath of that, the Trump administration announced a new rule which called for broader accommodations, not only of religious objections to these abortion pill mandate, but also to moral objections on the part of employers to the abortion pill mandate. And that's the subject of this week's news, whether or not the Trump administration might be looking to revise those newly minted proposed rules relating to religious and moral accommodations.
Well, Stephen, do you expect some kind of legal battle once the administration rolls out the new exemptions?
Well, the legal battle has been going on for 7 years and likely will continue. I personally don't know that the Trump administration is signaling a substantive change of course in defending these rules. The New York Times reported today, I believe, that they might be signaling a retreat from those rules. I personally think that it's more likely that they're looking to shore up certain defenses and that they're retrenching to defend the rules. It's a good thing for religious and ethical Americans that object to abortion pill mandates like this one. It's a good thing for employers like Hobby Lobby that want to provide their employees with a living wage, with a good set of benefits, but don't want to compromise their religious beliefs in doing so by providing for these abortion-causing pills.
Stephen, switching gears here, we're just days away from the midterm elections. How important is the pro-life vote when it comes to conservative candidates?
Well, Americans United for Life thinks that the pro-life vote is absolutely critical. When you look at places where the conservative community is engaged and active in these elections, for example, in Missouri in the Claire McCaskill, Josh Hawley election, you'll see that the expected voters, those who report that they're expecting to vote, are often pro-life voters. We think that pro-lifers are engaged. They see that the Trump administration is doing more good for unborn lives and for persons at risk than just about any administration in history, and they want to see that continue. And at AUL, we want to see that continue too.
Stephen, last question for you. Of course, you've heard reported about the Kavanaugh bounce. How significant do you think that's going to be when it plays out next Tuesday, come midterm election day?
Well, I do think that feeds into the energy on the part of pro-life voters. I think pro-life voters know that Justice Kavanaugh, now on the Supreme Court, is a good man, and that these are allegations that were ungrounded and should not have been entertained, frankly, because many of them were so spurious. But were entertained for political reasons, and that has made pro-life voters angry, frankly, and they're going to take out their anger in an appropriate way, thankfully, at the ballot box. And so we'll see how much of a bump that gives conservatives and pro-life candidates, but we think it will be significant.
As you said, we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. Stephen Aden with Americans United for Life, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Well, after the bruising battle over now Justice Brett Kavanaugh, it's hard to imagine another confirmation fight. But President Trump might have the chance to nominate another justice, maybe even two. As Paul Strand reports from the court, those nominees better be ready because, believe it or not, they could face far worse attacks.
As we now know, Justice Kavanaugh's confirmation battle was so vicious, it's become a major election issue for both sides. But what happens next time? Will the process stay the same or maybe get even worse? Constitutional law attorney Jenna Ellis watched the latest confirmation process with dismay.
To see how just incredibly evil the process was, and to see just the screaming and the interruptions of the Senate.
Policy analyst Jeff Hunt of Colorado Christian University also found it disturbing.
It was clear all throughout the Kavanaugh hearings where they're banging on the doors of the U.S. Supreme Court. They're in violent protests.
Hunt and Ellis believe pro-abortion forces attack so furiously because of their panic about what a conservative majority on the court might do to Roe versus Wade.
Women want to have the so-called right to choose, and Kavanaugh is representing everything that the left fears.
This was really just about stopping somebody who might be pro-life, who would look at the Constitution in an original intent way.
That's why a conservative like Judge Amy Coney Barrett, a known pro-life Catholic and constitutionalist, could face even worse attacks if nominated. A number of senators made her faith an issue during her confirmation to a federal appeals court.
She's a woman, and so the attack will be different, but she's a very openly faith-based woman. She's a mom. She's very pro-life. And as Senator Feinstein said, the dogma lies loudly within you. That's going to be partially the attack. And that type of political animosity really has no place in our confirmation hearing process.
Hunt says Barrett or any other pro-life constitutionalist will likely face an onslaught from the left in the Senate and media.
They want to stop them because of their judicial philosophy. And so with Amy, you would get someone who looks at the Constitution and wants to interpret the Constitution according to its original intent. But they're going to throw everything they possibly can to stop it.
Writer David Carter recently observed on the conservative website Ricochet.com the attempted wholesale destruction of Brett Kavanaugh, consisting as it did of lurid, fact-free allegations of the worst kind, ultimately revealed itself to be nothing less than a desperate attempt to keep off of the Supreme Court anyone who might demonstrate fidelity to the Constitution as written. And David French wrote in National Review, many of his, Kavanaugh's, accusers were operating in blatant, obvious bad faith. They were willing, eager even, to destroy him to keep him off the Supreme Court.
That's horrible. We are better as a society and as a country than just trying to seek to destroy someone's reputation solely to win political battles.
Anyone's faith is supposed to be off limits when they're considered for public office, but people's faith has come under attack more and more these days. Even Pastor Andrew Brunson praying at the White House after his release from Turkey.
A couple of the senators remarking how it was so great that he prayed with President Trump in the Oval Office. There was a lot of Twitter attacks against a couple of senators for saying, you know, as a senator and in the Oval Office, there's this separation of church and state. I mean, they're trying to make this the new norm.
What can people of faith do to battle this trend? Ella says one of the most important ways is to vote, or you may see your rights decay.
If we don't speak truth into our culture and we don't make sure that we are electing the people to best represent and protect our rights in the midterms and in 2020 and beyond, then yes, we're going to start seeing that. We need to be involved in our families and our churches, but also in our civil society. We are members of America, and we need to make sure that we participate.
Voting in those midterms is already happening across the country, and the final day to vote is Election Day itself, November 6th. Paul Strand, CBN News, the Supreme Court.
After about 9 years in prison, a look at why a blasphemy case against a Pakistani Christian was overturned when we come back.
Watch live election coverage on the CBN News Channel, Tuesday, November 6th from 8 p.m. to midnight.
Welcome back. Assia Bibi, the Pakistani Christian woman sentenced to death for blasphemy, is free today. The country's highest court acquitting her of the charges that brought her a death sentence back in 2010. Pakistan's Chief Justice announced the verdict to a packed courtroom. The charges against Bibi date back to a hot day in 2009 when she went to get water for her fellow farm workers. Now, 2 Muslim women refused to drink from a container used by Bibi because she's a Christian. Later, a mob accused her of blasphemy. Her family and lawyers say she never insulted the prophet. The landmark ruling could set off mass protests or violence by hardline Islamists. Well, Jordan Sekulow of the American Center for Law and Justice joins us now. Jordan, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, John.
Jordan, can you talk a little bit about the role the American Center for Law and Justice has played concerning Assia Bibi's case?
Yeah, this has been a long case, 9 years. We went back, and 7 years ago, we had first posted about this. In that time period, we actually opened up an office in Pakistan, the Center for Law and Justice in Pakistan, in Lahore, which is near the area where Assia Bibi lived and was arrested and ultimately, for the first time many years ago, sentenced to death by hanging. So over the course of the 9 years and the advocacy, we had over 800,000 people sign our petition. We utilized our European Center for Law and Justice. We kept talking about this on social media. We didn't forget Assia Bibi. In the midst of others, positive stories, of Christians being released, recognizing that in Pakistan, she was facing a law that is actually on the books, that is this blasphemy law, which we have condemned, believe is wrong. But there was a very strong opinion finally today out of Pakistan's Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, actually quoting the Quran and quoting the Hadith and the Islamic law in condemning those who had ultimately brought these charges, and then even the lower court judges who convicted Assia Bibi of this blasphemy charge.
Jordan, I have to ask, were you at all surprised by today's ruling, given the severity of the charges that were brought against her in Pakistan?
Here's why there was some surprise, is not so much that we believe that if the Supreme Court there actually ruled on this case, that they would rule against Assia Bibi and actually have her execution move forward. But Pakistan kept delaying. You actually saw officials, the governor of her region was killed for taking up her cause by his own security guard, shot 21 times. This was years ago. We had Supreme Court justices in Pakistan recusing themselves consistently from this case. So what could have, there were a number of ways the court could have punted or kept the case going without issuing a final decision. So what is most surprising and what is great here and what to celebrate is that this is a conclusion, that she was acquitted completely of this charge of blasphemy. Is a strong decision for all Christians in Pakistan. But I do want to remind people right now to be in prayer that Assia Bibi is, she's in a secure location, but that she is able to leave and stay secure. Pray for the small Christian community in Pakistan. There are riots in the streets there right now because of this decision. And pray for her attorney and these Muslim judges on Pakistan's Supreme Court who did the right thing, utilizing Islamic law uniquely enough to free Assia Bibi after 9 years of her unlawful detainment and facing death by hanging.
Jordan, we only have about a minute left. You gladly heard you speak about her being in a safe location, but I'm wondering if you can maybe expand a little bit about how today's decision isn't just a win for Christians, but religious minorities in places like Pakistan.
That's right. So the court actually came out and condemned mob rule and also these mobs implementing the law. So they said in the court decision, the Supreme Court decision out of Pakistan, it is not up to a mob, it is not up to the community to decide when blasphemy laws have been broken and when someone should be found guilty. It is up to the judicial system, and they condemn the mob rule. Oftentimes in Pakistan, it's not so much the case, though we do have blasphemy cases that we're working on now in Pakistan. That's the rarity, that you're actually in the judicial system. The norm is that a mob of radicals attacks Christians or kills Christians, and it puts the law in their own hands. And so Pakistan needs to do more. The court has said that to protect Christians, and I hope and pray they are doing so today as we speak, because while Assia Bibi is in this secure location, and so is her family, those Christian targets, and I call them that because the radicals are out in the streets, they become targets, and it's up to police forces and the national government in Pakistan to protect the Christian minority who cannot protect themselves.
The American Center for Law and Justice is Jordan Sekula. Jordan, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, John.
Why one prominent Christian pastor is speaking out in favor of celebrating Halloween. Well, today is Halloween. It's a holiday some Christians have mixed feelings about, but one prominent evangelical pastor tells CBN News Halloween was always his favorite. Senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon has more.
Yeah, that's a headline you don't hear very often, but Dr. Russell Moore, who of course is president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention, recently told me that as a kid, when people asked him about his favorite holiday, he knew he should say either Christmas or Easter, but the truth was Halloween was his favorite.
I knew that wasn't the right answer from an evangelical Christian kid, but I think the reason that Halloween was my favorite holiday was because it was the one night of the year where it seemed that grown-ups recognized that there were scary things out there and that they would protect us. And so it was a time of kind of acknowledging what we all sort of intuitively knew, while at the same time having this sense of security, these forces out there won't win. And the other reason is because there's just not a lot of family drama surrounding Halloween. No one ever slams the door and says, "You've ruined my Halloween."
That is very true. Moore says he now realizes those two things go together, that we're involved in spiritual warfare in the world, which often manifests itself in family situations, especially around important holidays. Moore writes extensively about these family issues and how to get through them in his new book, The Storm-Tossed Family: How the Cross Reshapes the Family.
Thanks, Jennifer. Interesting perspective indeed. Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation. We'll see you again tomorrow.